continue to have a conversation on exactly what happened and where things are going to go from here on out, as well as the NTSB is going to be investigating this. So we're going to be bringing in David Evans. He's FAA certified airline transport pilot. He's also a flight instructor. And so, David, thanks so much for being here with us. We appreciate your time here today. I know you saw the pictures coming also from Texas. And what were your first thoughts when you saw some of these crash scenes of our chopper video there?
Oh, that's incredible. The complete destruction of the plane, and then to later learn that everybody escaped and got out of the plane and was okay, a couple minor injuries. Incredible story, no question about it.
So let's just kind of get into the details right away. So we obviously now know that this flight was going to take off. Talk about some of the logistics when you have an airplane trying to make this maneuver and then all of a sudden they realize this isn't going to happen. What would have been some of the things this pilot was going to try to do?
Sure. A couple things. First off, the pilots that fly these aircraft are certified specifically to fly them. They have type ratings for those aircraft. So we're talking about pilots that are experienced. Prior to taking the flight, they're running their calculations on their weight and balance of the aircraft. Is it within the envelope? They're determining how long the takeoff distance is going to be. They're going to determine their accelerate stop distance if they have to abort the takeoff. And these are the considerations that they take into account. And of course, one of the serious considerations is if I've given the aircraft power and I'm tootling down the runway at high speed, but I'm not going fast enough to take off, what do I do? Do I have enough room to stop the aircraft? Or do I continue flying?
And so let's also then talk about this investigation that's going to take place. Obviously, NTSB is going to be headed into the scene. What are they going to have to do? Talk about some of those timeline details.
Yeah, I think they're going to interview the flight crew, the pilot, the co-pilot. They're going to take a look at some of their calculations, the weight and balance of the aircraft. They're going to try to determine if weather was a factor. Didn't look like it, but they're going to take a look at that. They're going to look at the aircraft and the performance specifications in the operating handbook, see how those compare. And they're probably going to inspect the field for foreign object debris, FOD is what we call it in the aviation industry. I'm suspecting that's where they're going to start.
And I just want to hear about some of your experience too, David. Have you, and your experience, ever had some of these technical problems that have led to sometimes maybe some very big concerns and worries? Because I'm sure that was something that these pilots, obviously you have a whole checklist of things that need to be looked at ahead of prior to these takeoffs.
Right. As a matter of fact, it's funny that you mentioned about 6 months ago, I was taking off in an aircraft on a shorter field. And I wasn't generating the power out of the power plant of the airplane that I should have. And I had to make a split-second decision. Was I going to go airborne and come back around and land, or was I going to abort the takeoff? Fortunately, I was able to go ahead and take off and come back around and land. So these are things that happen from time to time, but generally not. I mean, flying aircraft is safe, and we have built-in margins of safety.
And let's just talk about this aircraft too, because again, these videos that we saw and the pictures and images that were coming in just yesterday, it definitely looked like it was a larger plane, and we know that 21 people were on board. Are you familiar with the MD-87 plane, and can talk about just some of the technical logistics of this aircraft?
I can talk just a little bit about it. I haven't flown the plane myself, but it's an MD-87 built by McDonnell Douglas. That is probably a 1980s, late 80s vintage, I'm guessing. It has a couple of Pratt & Whitney jet engines, very reliable engines. Its maximum takeoff weight is 140,000 pounds. It can be configured to have as many as about 130 passengers. I'm not sure how this aircraft was configured, and that is another question that NTSB will be looking into. But, very reliable aircraft. These aircraft have been used, especially in the 80s and 90s, a lot in commercial aviation. So they have quite a track record of flying.
And, hearing that all 21 people made it off of this flight, you can obviously tell too, when we saw some of those track marks going through the field, the plane came to a rest here kind of on this side road. How important is it that every single time people are boarding on flights, they're listening to these safety instructions? These crew members know exactly what to do in case of emergency. You think about how many thousands of flights take off each and every single day. A lot of people don't pay attention because they just don't think it will happen to them.
It's funny, there's a lot of things that on the flight they ask you to do. They ask you to put the seats upright and put the trays, stow the trays, and clear the aisle. That's so that you can egress the airplane if there's, a landing like this where you have to get out quickly. You don't have to trip over the trays and the chairs that are in your aisle. So there are reasons for this, that the FAA has demanded this, and they're built-in safety aspects to flight.
I know that a lot of people are probably, they see moments like this, they kind of second guess, okay, what do I actually listen to when these flight attendants are talking to me? And also, I know a lot of us don't get to go on airplanes that are smaller like this, but that doesn't make them any more dangerous than the big ones that load up, 100 of passengers at a time, right?
No, that's correct. And commercial aviation has a very good safety record in the United States. And it's because of the training and what we've learned in the past decades of flight. And, they have these rules and regulations for a reason, and they seem to be working, and we adjust them as we go along. Every accident that the NTSB investigates, we have a takeaway. And, we adjust things as appropriate. And
what do you think the takeaway from this accident is going to be, David? Because obviously, again, 21 people, very lucky that this incident did happen in the manner that it happened, where they were able to glide through into this field and then be able to deboard before the flames, fully engulfed this aircraft.
I'm not exactly sure what the takeaway will be. I had two takeaways. They're just my own personal observations. One is the accident still happened within the scope of the airport environment. Anytime you can land a plane or abort or take off in the area of the airport environment, you have a much bigger fudge factor for safety. And the other thing is that the aircraft skidded off the runway north in this direction that it was going, and it appeared to be at least somewhat in controlled flight. So kudos to everybody. But ultimately, in the end, the investigation will enumerate those things that happened specifically.
Finally, David, I just want to touch on, since you are an instructor, how do you prepare those people who are, getting those licenses to fly planes, whether they be small aircrafts all the way to the commercial ones? How do you help prepare them for instances like this, where they could possibly have to deal with trying to help get people off to help make them survive? Because if they wouldn't have been able to get everyone off, that those that jet fuel, those
Sure.
fire flames, that would have been a very dangerous situation.
Obviously, when we start instruction, we start in small aircraft, and you go through a lot of emergency procedures when you're teaching students, from engine outs to fires to emergency descents, just everything you can think of. Some people say and jokingly that, you learn all the emergency flying techniques, and at the end you've learned to fly. And so that's what we do. Also, there's an emphasis, even flying in small planes, that the pilot inform the passengers on how to egress the aircraft and how to perform in an emergency, to unlock the doors and to get themselves out. And so it starts at the very beginning, flying a little Cessna or a Piper, all the way into training in these highly technical jet aircraft.
And we know NTSB was out there at the site this morning. Any final thoughts that we haven't touched on, David, that you think are important to mention for all of our viewers at home watching on where this investigation is going to go?
I obviously I have no idea exactly where it's going to go, but it will start with them talking to the pilots, finding about how the aircraft was operating, what their calculations were, the weather, the loading. They're going to start in that area, and they'll move forward from there. And they're very good at what they do. They're very good at what they do.
Yeah, and as we've said, there's always a lesson to be learned, then to be shared with others to help try to keep everyone safe in future instances. So we do appreciate you helping kind of break it all down, remind us exactly what we do know, and of course, hoping that we can prevent instances like this from happening in the future. So once again, we did have David Evans here joining us, FAA certified airline transport pilot, also a flight instructor. We appreciate your time here today, David.
Thank you, Christy, very much.